Hey guys, I'm Bethany. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy that you're here and I'm so excited about today's video. It is my June reading wrap up and the month of June was so good. It was such a good reading month. I actually read 10 books in the month of June, which is the most I've read in a very long time. So I'm feeling very excited about that and so excited to share them with you. It was just so good. Like, so many of these books were so good. If you enjoy the book content, you should follow my book Instagram. I keep it updated throughout the month on what I'm reading and then obviously do a reading wrap up and TBR at the end of the month, beginning of the next month. So I think I borrowed 4 from the library, 3 that I own, and then 3 on my Kindle. So let's get into it. I'm so excited. So the first book I read was The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood, and I actually pretty sure I stayed up till 1 a.m. finishing this book. I think I finished it in 1 or 2 sittings. And I really enjoyed it. Clearly I gave it 5 stars. Honestly, I gave so many books 5 stars. I'm like, do I need a better ranking scale? Do I need to start giving some books 6 stars? So it's about this girl named Olive. She is a PhD student and she kisses this professor so she can convince her friend that she's not interested in the guy her friend likes, if that makes sense. So she ends up kissing this guy who's a professor. He has a pretty bad reputation, as in he's not very kind, kind of rude and harsh in the way he teaches. So basically it's like a fake dating trope, academia vibes. I think it's my first book reading like a academia kind of trope. One thing I didn't like about this book is that there was a spicy scene and it felt like the whole book was so wholesome and sweet, and then there's just bam, a spicy scene. I'm like, that felt a little unnecessary. Didn't need it, didn't want it. That's honestly probably gonna get a lot of that in this video. I could just do without the spicy scenes. So I'm gonna start reading some YA books so I won't have any of those scenes in the books, because obviously adult books have that, unfortunately. And then I also thought that the author could have done more with the prologue. Throughout the whole book, I was just waiting for the information that came out in the prologue to come up, and the ending with the prologue was just pretty underwhelming. I was like, wow, I've been looking forward to this happening throughout the whole book, and it was just extremely underwhelming. So I was disappointed in that. The professor's name was Adam, and I wish we got his point of view. I just love the guy's point of view. It's really fun to read. But overall, I really wanted to know what happened and couldn't put it down. So that's why I gave it 5 stars. It just really gave me that vibe, even though there was a few things that I didn't love about it. Overall, I really enjoyed the book and highly recommend reading it. It's very popular. I feel like everyone talks about it. The next book that I read was Just Last Night by Mcfarlane. And when I first got this book, I thought it was a romance, and it's very much not a romance. There's a romance subplot, but it's definitely not a romance. So if you're going into it, I would know that. So it's basically about this girl named Eve and her group of friends, and they're in their 30s, and you just kind of go through their friendship after one night where something changes everything. It deals with a lot of grief, so if you don't like that, I would just know that ahead of time. But I did give this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like I went through it very quickly as well. I did think that it was a little harder to read because it's based in England, and I just find that language harder to read, and that's because I'm from America and we just talk differently. They have different slang that we don't say here, so I have to Google what they're talking about sometimes. Like I said, it's not a rom-com at all. It's definitely probably more of a literary fiction, and it's very character driven on Eve, the main character, which I really liked. I love just the way the story progressed and how she grew. I honestly would recommend going into it blind, knowing that it's not a romance and knowing that there's some sad moments, because I feel like you're gonna get the best out of the book, and that's how I went into it, was kind of blind and not knowing what was gonna happen. I really thought it was gonna be happy, and it was not happy. So I'll just let you know that. I also checked the trigger warnings before I read this book, and I think doing that kind of ruined part of the book for me. And I feel like if I would have not checked the trigger warnings, it would have been even better, because I wouldn't have known one thing that happened. So if you can deal with some harder topics, I wouldn't check the trigger warnings, just because I feel like it ruins some of the book. And also, I love when a guy character is kind of mysterious, kind of has a bad rap, and then the girl kind of gets him out of his shell and pulls back his layers, and he turns out to be really sweet and kind. I love when that happens in a book. I feel like this book and The Love Hypothesis had that vibe. I loved how the book ended, and I loved one of the characters that I'm talking about. If you read the book, you know who I'm talking about. He was so sweet. I also loved that it was more based on friendship than romance. I thought that was a really good part of the book. I really enjoyed that. So overall, loved it, gave it 5 stars. And then the next book is Part of Your World by Jimenez. I actually read 90 pages of this a few months ago and then DNFed it and picked it up again this month, and I loved it. I love Jimenez. She has such good books. She wrote the Friend Zone series, all 5 stars, all incredible books. and this one also is 5 stars. I loved it so much. So basically it's about this girl named Alexis. She is on her way home from a funeral and she breaks down in this little small town, and this guy named Daniel helps her, and then she ends up going to this little restaurant type thing that they have in the town, the only one open. That's how tiny it is. She runs into this guy again, and you just kind of see what happens from there. She is a doctor in like a bigger city, and he is obviously from a small town, so you get that kind of vibe, which you probably can guess from the cover because obviously he's in a small town and she's in a big city. But I love that vibe. So it's definitely like small town romance. It's also a dual point of view, so you get Daniel and Alexis's point of view, which I really loved. I love that. I love when you get the guy's point of view because I just want to know what he's thinking and what he's feeling in these moments. Like I said, I did read 90 pages of this and then put it down, and I think that had to do more with my book slump that I was in than the book itself. I honestly think if I had bought this book and just read it all the way through, I would have really enjoyed it to begin with. So I think that was more my fault. I don't think it was this book. Also stayed up till 1 a.m. reading this book because it was so good. It's like you just need to know what happens in these small town romance vibes. You want the ending. So my SD card ran out of storage, but we are back. The author of this book, Abby Jimenez, is just so good at talking about hard topics. Every one of her books touches on some sort of hard topic, and she just does very well at making it lighthearted, but still like having an important conversation, but making it still like a lighthearted, good romance. So I love that. It definitely has some found family in it because it's a small town, and the people in the small town were just so sweet. So I loved that. I'm also really excited for Alexa's best friend, Bree. Her story is coming out. Abby Jimenez is writing a book on her story, so I'm very excited for that to come out next year. And I gave it 5 stars, even though I had like kind of DNF'd it. I just get so attached to books, and I can't give a book less than 5 stars if I feel really connected to it. So 5 stars, loved this book. All of Abby Jimenez's books are so good. Next we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This book has been everywhere. It came out in May, and it's beautiful. Like the cover is so cute. I actually tabbed a little bit of it, which was super fun. I've been loving tabbing books. I've tabbed a couple this month and it's been great. Basically, this book is about a girl named Nora. She is a literary agent in New York City, and basically her sister is pregnant and wants to go on a little trip to North Carolina and invites Nora. It's like, hey, we should go do this, like have a little peaceful time in this small town. And when she gets there, she runs into this guy named Charlie, who is an editor. She didn't have a very good first encounter with him back in New York City, so when she gets to this town and sees him, she's just, you know, not very happy, kind of like enemies, but not really, more just like didn't get along the first time they met. And she runs into him, and basically you just kind of see what happens. There's definitely a lot of like sister dynamics in this book, but it is a romance. I gave this book 4.75 stars, and the reason is because I feel like the first 150 pages were kind of slow. I feel like there wasn't much happening, but the end of the book gets very, very good, and I really loved it. I have only read Beach Read and this one by Emily Henry, and Beach Read is one of my favorite romances, so this one is not as good as that one, but I did really, really enjoy it. It was definitely different than most romance books, and I love the concept of books in this book. I've actually read another book this month with that concept, and I loved the beginning of the book how she talked about romance books and just kind of how they usually are. And if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. I love that it touched on that, and I also found myself smiling and laughing as I read this book. The banter is just so good. I feel like everyone says that about this book. The banter between Nora and Charlie are just so good. It's amazing, and I highly recommend it, and also just get it for this cover. The next book I read on my Kindle, it's Kindle Unlimited. I actually read it in my reading vlog this month, so I will link it below. These next 2 books I read in my reading vlog. So basically it's a second chance romance about this girl named Violet and this guy named Will. Basically Violet and Will's families own this beach house together, and they go to it every summer, and then one summer everything falls apart, and then they don't speak for years. The usual second chance romance trope. So it's basically like a then and now perspective on what happened back then and then what happens now, because they're back at this summer house trying to decide if they're going to sell it. I did wish that we got Will's point of view. It was just Violet's, and I just like the guy's point of view, as I've said multiple times in this video. I feel like it's the perfect summer read. Obviously it's set at a beach house, and those summer reads are just so good. If you liked Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, you need to read this book because it's very similar. It's not as good as Every Summer After, but it is similar. I gave it 4.5 stars because it just didn't give me that 5-star feeling, and I didn't love it as much as Every Summer After, but it gives very similar vibes if you want to read something similar to that. It's definitely easy to get through because you just want to know what happens. I didn't particularly like all the spicy scenes. I felt it was unnecessary, and I also felt like the past timeline made it seem like she was way younger. I'm pretty sure she was 18 years old, and it felt like she was way younger than that, because a lot of times in second chance romances they're very young, like 14, 15, 16, but she was 18, and it just made it seem like she was younger based on the writing, which I didn't quite understand. Also, while I was reading this book, I really missed the banter of Book Lovers because I read it right after Book Lovers. So if you didn't read Book Lovers before it, you might give it 5 stars. I feel like a rating on a book honestly has a lot to do with when you're reading it and your mindset when you're reading it. So I don't know. I did think it just still wasn't as good as Every Summer After. That the book is so good. Next book is the only nonfiction book I read this month, which was Who Are You Following by Sadie, Robertson, Huff. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved how it dived deep into social media, and then at the end of the book, there's a reflection so you can apply it to your own life. And I also think it's a great book for new Christians because at the end, it gets more of like an altar call almost, where you can give your life to the Lord. So I think if you're a new Christian, it would be a great book to read, but any Christian can read it. If you have struggles with social media, getting on it too much, scrolling, comparison, things like that, I think this book will be great. And I really enjoyed it. It was just not as good as some of my favorite faith-based books. I feel like I always have to give a disclaimer on my book. It's not 5 stars, but I loved it. It was just not as good as some of my other faith-based books that I love, but 4.5 stars is still a great rating. Also, a couple books I tried to read. I tried to read All the Bright Places and got like maybe a few pages in and did not finish it. And then I started Things I Never Got Over and got like 20 pages in and just couldn't read it. Wasn't interested, didn't want to read it. The fact that it's like 500 pages really throws me off. Don't really want that. And then Haley Pham's review of it, she did not like it, which makes me kind of not want to read it because the thing she said that made her not like it makes me think that I probably won't like it either. So I did not finish that one. And then of course I read the Summer I Turned Pretty series, all 3 books. I pretty much finished them all in a day. They're very short, very easy to read, like less than 300 pages. Basically it's about this girl named Belly who her and her mom go to this beach house every summer with her mom's best friend and her 2 sons, Jeremiah and Conrad. You probably know this because there's a show out on this book, and I actually watched the show and it was so good. I thought the first book was, I have like 2 opinions. I feel like nothing happened in the first book, but then I also felt like the first book was so good. Like I felt like it was just really good summery vibes. Like she's just doing things in the summer, which I think is super fun. So I loved that part of the book, but I also felt like nothing happened. But I also felt like I got through pretty quickly. So I don't know. So I gave the first book 4 stars for that reason. And the second book is called It's Not Summer Without You. And it's pretty sad, honestly. But I feel like as the series progressed, it got better. And I realized that in the second book. And then the third book, I gave 4.5 stars. It's called We'll Always Have Summer. And I really enjoyed the third one. I think I gave it 4.5 stars because all the books together were just good and I feel like it deserved a higher rating. But I didn't give it 5 stars because I like some other books more. But I think it's the perfect summer read. Like if you need a good summery beach read, you need to read this book and also watch the show because it's very good. But truly, like especially the first book, you just feel like you're at a summer beach house relaxing, which is just, you just want to feel that way. I do feel like the series went from like 0 to 100 and I wasn't expecting what happened at the end, but I did expect who Belly ended up with. Overall, I think it's a cute summer series to read. I highly recommend it. I do think the show made me more invested in the book and I just keep thinking about it, so I did really love it. Also, just random thought, I don't know why throughout the book I kept wanting to say Jeremy instead of Jeremiah, like as I was reading in my head, and it had nothing to do with Belly's best friend Taylor calling him that. Honestly, probably I was just lazy and didn't want to sound out Jeremiah, so I would just say Jeremy because it was quicker. I don't know, kind of random, but anyways, finally we're on the last book that I read this month, and it was The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberly and Austin Siegemund-Broka. I have conflicting opinions about this book. I don't know why. But basically, it's about this girl named Katrina and this guy named Nathan were co-writers. They wrote this best-selling novel and then basically stopped talking. They didn't really do any press or anything for the book, stopped talking, and people are speculating like what happened. Did they have an affair? Did they just not like each other? Did they not like writing together? And 4 years later, they have to write another book together. And it's basically set in Florida at this beach house. It's not really on the beach, but it's in Florida, that kind of vibe. And they're just writing this book together. So like forced proximity, summery vibes, that kind of thing. And you just kind of see what happens. I did stay up to like 1:30 finishing this book, but I don't know why I'm having a hard time making my thoughts about this book. I did rate it 5 stars on Goodreads because I thought it was a very good book. Like the book did what it was meant to do, and I loved that it was talking about reading. Like I love that in books. Obviously I read Book Lovers, and I just love when they are talking about books and it's like people writing books. And I loved how they communicated to each other through writing. I loved that it was set in Florida, and I loved that it was different than other romance books, like in its format. Like I said earlier, I feel like when you read a book and your mindset during the book really determines how you feel about it, because I read this after watching and reading the Summer I Turned Pretty series, and all I could think about was that. So I don't know, but I did really enjoy this book. Like I thought it was so good, but I don't know why I'm conflicted about it, because I feel like I really enjoyed it. Like I really loved it. Maybe I just didn't feel connected to the characters as much as some other books, but when I gave a rating on Goodreads, I did give it 5 stars. So I'm conflicted about this book. I did really love it, obviously tabbed it, and highly recommend reading it. I think you would enjoy it, but I don't know. I've heard people not give it very good reviews. Haley Hamp's the only one I've seen give it 5 stars, so I don't really know, but I did love it. I'm glad I own it, and it's just really cute. Love the cover. So anyways, that is all the books that I read in the month of June. It was a lot. I've been talking for a long time, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe. I post every Tuesday and Saturday here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram. I post fun stuff over there, and I have a book Instagram if you want to follow that. I love doing this book content. It's so fun. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you very soon for my next video. Bye.